Are children today really different than children of years past? Or have we, as adults, forgotten what it was like to be young? There's a growing trend in our society that can no longer be ignored. More and more children are being diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. It's often framed as a disease, a disorder, a dysfunction that needs fixing. But is it really? Or have we lost perspective on what it means to be a child? Let's start with this. The human brain does not come fully developed at birth. In fact, one of its most important areas, the frontal lobe, continues maturing well into a person's 20s. And what does the frontal lobe control? Decision-making, emotional regulation, impulse control. It's no wonder children are chaotic bundles of energy. They simply haven't lived long enough to develop the perspective that adults have. Experience builds the brain just as much as it builds the body. You can tell a child 1,000 times not to climb the tree or touch the hot stove. But until they slip, until they burn their fingers, the words fall on deaf ears. It's not stubbornness, it's curiosity. It's how they learn. It's innate. But in today's world, that curiosity and boundless energy are increasingly seen as problems instead of opportunities for growth. We see the wiggles, the inability to focus, the impulsiveness, and immediately a label is applied. ADHD. Now, before we dive deeper, let's be clear. Is ADHD real? But the question is not whether ADHD exists. The question is why we're seeing so much more of it. Could it be that today's children are fundamentally different? Or is it our environment, our food, our societal expectations, and yes, even our own failings as adults that are creating this surge? Look at what children consume every day. I'm not talking about social media or TV, not yet, we'll get there. I'm talking about food. The main ingredient in most of their diets is sugar. It's in almost everything they eat: cereals, bread, pasta, snacks, drinks, even baby formula. For a young growing body, sugar is an explosive fuel. It delivers bursts of energy that demand to be burned. And what do? We pack them off to school, sit them at desks, and tell them to stay still. When they burst at the seams, we call it hyperactivity. When they're bored, distracted, or struggling to focus, we call it a disorder. Is it, though? Or is it simply biology acting exactly as it was designed? We also can't ignore the role of digital content. Studies show that children now consume more media than any previous generation, often hours a day, and much of it, even content labeled "for kids," is infused with hyper-stimulating imagery, noise, and sometimes violence. Why is it then that a child watching a cartoon about laser battles at home might be scolded at school for shaping a piece of bread into the form of a gun? The mixed messages are deafening. We introduce chaos into their minds, yet demand order from their behavior. Something doesn't add up. But there's another layer to this, an idea that stretches far beyond sugar, screens, or even physical energy. It's the idea that children today might truly be different. Some researchers and thinkers have theorized that humanity itself is evolving at an accelerated rate, that the children of today are faster learners, more intuitively aware, and more curious than ever before. Perhaps their brains are wired not for our present world, but for the one they'll help create. What we perceive as disruptive might simply be a trait of the innovators, creators, and problem solvers of tomorrow. Think about this. Our education systems, for the most part, haven't changed in over a century. Rows of desks, tests and grades, predictable routines. Yet the world outside the classroom has never been more unpredictable. The children who are labeled distracted might simply be bored by a system that can't keep up with them. A system that tells them to stay in line when what they really need is room to grow, explore, and create. So what do we do about it? Do we medicate children into submission, dulling their minds and energy to fit them into a box that might no longer be relevant? Or do we try to understand them better? There are solutions here if we're willing to listen. Start with food. Children deserve healthy diets that minimize sugars while fueling growth with real nutrition. Rethink media exposure. Encourage creative, stimulating activities that challenge them to think rather than numb their minds. And above all, give them space. Space to run, to climb, to invent, to fail, and yes, even to break the rules. Because maybe, just maybe, it's not the children who need to be healed. Maybe it's us, our systems, our expectations, our approach. Instead of trying to change our kids to fit today's society, perhaps we should be changing society to fit them. Supporting their growth rather than stifling it. Nurturing their potential instead of diagnosing it away. The children of today are not defective. They are bursting with potential, ready to shape tomorrow. Let's make sure we give them the tools, the patience, and the understanding they need to succeed. Because in the end, their growth is our future.